Hello and welcome to Qsports. I'm Amudu Gajaga and thank you very much for joining us. Coming up tonight, the Africa Cup of Nations is getting very interesting in Cameroon. Well, countries that are tagged as minnows, debutants, Gambia, maybe Comoros a little bit, but for Gambia, they're marching on in the competition. Sierra Leone played against Algeria and got a vital draw, and in their second game, late dramatic equalizer against the Ivory Coast. How about the shocking results of Equatorial Guinea ending Algeria's unbeaten run, a 35-match winning streak, or I would say unbeaten streak? So we'll be talking about that in the studio, and I'm joined by Adedarame. All that on tonight's Qsports. Yes, welcome, and this is Qsports. Thank you very much for joining us. We're talking about the Africa Cup of Nations. Gambia earning a vital draw against Mali in a game that was well contested. Yes, Mali, it's very obvious, ball possession, they dominated, they had multiple of chances. Yeah, and as well, they came close on goal on several attempts. But it was the Gambia that first hit the post. That's right. Through two free kicks. You watch them, one from Musa Barrow and the other one from Ablai Jallo. Very interesting. They could have been 2-0 up in the first half, despite Mali dominating 70% of possession. Sure. Amazing game it was, Ade. You must have watched it.
It was a fantastic game. I watched it from beginning to end. And as you rightly say, when I saw the first free kick, the commentator on the channel I was watching, and he was commentating with Leroy Rosigno, who I know, who used to play for Sierra Leone. And Leroy said, he's not going to take it from there, is he? And the commentator said, no, maybe he's just measuring it up. And then, of course, about 30 meters out, and it was a rocket of a shot, and it cannoned off the edge of the post, and it would have been one of the goals, if not the goal of the tournament had it gone in. And then the second one from Ablai Jallo, again from about 20 meters, so a bit closer this time, and he curled it beautifully. Keeper was nowhere, and again they saw it come off. And so for all the possession, it just shows you what they always say about football. It's not possession alone that counts, it's what you do with it. And of course Gambia, when they had it, they had the more threatening ones. And I mean, Mali had 9 attempts on goal. None of them had been on target, and Gambia had 2, and both were on target. And that shows you the kind of magnitude of what the result could have been had those 2 gone in. They would have been fantastic goals. Fantastic game.
Great performance in the competition for debutants Gambia in AFCON for the first time, having victory in their first match against Mauritania, second match against Mali, sure. A 1-1 draw. And a late drama. We have to talk about the VAR, video assistant referee, if you like, yes. At one moment, they decided to favor the Malians, but after a check, the referee decided, you know what? Yeah. He tried to push Bissouma on the ground, and that was an unfair advantage he gave of the penalty. People were furious. The bench, the Gambian bench, that is,
they were up in arms.
Up in arms. And then there was another VAR check. And this one late in the game, 98 minutes.
That's right, and it favored the Gambia.
Gambia.
And this is what it is. In fact, somebody posted on Twitter, and she said, okay, all you Gambians who are complaining about VAR, I bet you're not complaining now. No. And that's the nature of VAR. I mean, sometimes it goes for you, sometimes it goes against you. And this happened in one game. Usually it happens in one game, but not in another. But this happened in the same game, first one against the Gambia, which, to be honest, I mean, and I've said this time and time again, I'm old-fashioned. When I played football, that would never have been a penalty, the first one. Neither would the second one, frankly. But these days, they get given. And so it made the game really tense, really exciting. And it shows, you talk about minnows, and we talked about this before the competition started. We said with the good squad that the Gambia has, they should not go in with any inferiority complex. They should say, we're going here, we're going to match these people, and we're going to try and emulate the likes of Cape Verde, the likes of Madagascar, who the first time they came shocked everybody by getting to the quarterfinals. Wouldn't it be brilliant if Gambia got to the quarterfinals or beyond? That would be amazing.
Amazing and fantastic news it would have definitely been. And when we look at the players in terms of performance, Hassan Cisse, who has been the main striker in the qualifiers, hasn't had the best of competition so far. Is that likely due to the style of play?
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say because of the tactics. You know, the tactics are more about containment. And it's not a bad thing when you come up against, you know, nations that are ranked higher than you. Sometimes you have to be cautious. I know, you know, go on social media, Gambians are being very critical, we're smiling, of the coach and saying, you know, he'll be a bit more expansive. But I think in the next game, perhaps we might see some of that, where, you know, they'll come out and they'll play. But yes, I think it's mainly to do with the style of play, where there's a lot of defending involved. Like you said, you know, I looked at the statistic at one point, it was 70% to Mali and 30% to the Gambia. When you have that kind of percentage of the ball, then, you know, for your strikers, there are fewer and fewer chances to score, of course.
Looking at the group, do we say they are almost there, almost certainly there? That's both Gambia and Mali on top of the group on 4 points each.
Well,
with a game
indeed,
to go
because
in the group phase.
as you know, even if you were to come third with 4 points, it's likely to get you through as, you know, best placed third place finisher. So almost there, but we don't want to get complacent. And I suspect the squad, based on what we've seen and from the coach, you know, there's no likelihood of complacency. And for me, the beautiful irony of it was that, yes, Mali had all the possession, but it wasn't a case of Gambia being outplayed. And for me, the beauty of it was we rammed down the throats of the Mali coach, all the nonsense he had spoken ahead of the game, talking about they're a small team, they have a few individuals, but, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's 3 points for my team. What a nonsense to say. What a shocking thing to say.
We've made him chew his words.
He's had to eat his words big time, you know, and rightly so. I mean, it was insulting and it was arrogant. And you know, I was actually hoping for victory, and that would really have rubbed it in.
Tunisia, statement of intent against Mauritania, 4-0.
You know,
what a score.
When you watch the game, it's a case of Mauritania put in the worst performance they possibly could. And so because of that, I don't think one can read too much into Tunisia's performance, like, oh, everybody's going to be scared of them. I watched the game and, you know, recorded it and then watched it just to be sure. Because when you hear 4-0, you think, oh, wow, it must have been. But, you know,
must have been a one-sided game, but it doesn't look.
It wasn't. You know, I've played in games where, you know, teams had 4 shots on goal and scored from each of them, and it was kind of like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite very interesting. Let's look about other groups, because it's very, very interesting. Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast.
You know,
much poise. Ivory Coast won their first game, and Sierra Leone grabbing that draw against Algeria, now heading to the second game, would want to fancy their chances against Ivory Coast, maybe perhaps a win. And Ivory Coast took the lead. It was an equalizer. Took the lead again, and in stoppage time. That's vital equalizer. You can describe the scene for us.
Well, the scene was one of the most bizarre goals that we will see scored in this. It was an innocuous ball that any keeper could and should have fielded. The keeper, in trying to stop it, only succeeded in scooping it back into play. Stephen Coker, former England international, now playing for Sierra Leone, kept his cool, played it in, and there to kind of help it over the line, even though he fell, was the Sierra Leone player Kamara. And so, you know, it was fantastic. I mean, but it was really quite bizarre because it was the 90th minute +3. And for us who were supporting Sierra Leone, we thought it was all over. But it just shows you that the match against Algeria wasn't a fluke. And also, the first goal that Sierra Leone scored to equalize was actually CAF chose this today as yesterday's goal of the day. Musa Tombo, you know, a player that we've talked about before, interesting player. I'm not sure we have time to go into why he's interesting, but
definitely
a really interesting player. And it was a fantastic goal, and it showed they were not overawed. And so, you know, Ivory Coast, their players came off thinking, they looked as if they'd lost the match. And for Sierra Leone, of course, they came off thinking, gosh, this is almost like a victory, because to score that late in the game was fantastic.
Fantastic, and the big highlight of the Africa Cup of Nations so far
and the big shock
is the shocker.
Yeah.
Algeria, the holders, the
Yes.
defending champions, if you like, playing against Equatorial Guinea
Sure.
and losing to them.
I hold my hand up. I'm one of those who said that Algeria would win this tournament. I'm beginning to look really, really silly because, first of all, they looked average in the draw against Sierra Leone. And then in losing to Equatorial Guinea, who really nobody, I think, would have thought. And what made me think Algeria would win this was not only the depth of squad they have, but look at the squad that they put out to win the FIFA Arab Cup. I mean, that squad itself and that team that won the Arab Cup would have beaten many teams, many first national teams. And yet, you know, you had somebody like Yassin Brahimi. He was on the bench. He came on late in the game, I think with about 8 or 9 minutes to go. They were hoping, he's quite a dynamic player, but he couldn't turn the tide. And it was amazing. I mean, somebody like Riyad Mahrez has looked pretty ineffectual. Again, Mohamed Salah for Egypt, albeit he scored 1 goal.
And even the likes of Baghdad Buneja.
But they've not looked impressive in this.
At all.
It's really quite amazing. And I had to smile when, after the Sierra Leone game, the Algeria, I mean, you know, Algeria coach saying that it was the heat. They weren't used to the heat. You're from Algeria.
Algeria?
You have all that desert.
The
What do you
desert.
mean? It was the heat. I mean, it was quite laughable. But we're seeing an interesting tournament. I think what we're also seeing is that we're seeing more goals. You know, I think Cameroon started it off with the 4-1. And then you had the 2-2 Sierra Leone. The Gambia game was 1-1 because we had all these 1-0, 1-0s and a couple of 0-0s. And we thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be really dull. But it's really opened up, and now we're seeing the goals are flowing.
Well, if Algeria didn't pass through to make it to the next round, that would be suck of the competition. They ranked bottom. There's still a match to go. A win for them in their next game can change the whole thing completely.
Well, you know, I posted again on Twitter. I said, this reminds me of Japan, Korea, 2002 World Cup. France came in with people like Thierry Henry, Trezeguet, a really fearsome strike force, and they exited as champions without scoring a single goal. They lost all 3 of their matches. Famously, of course, the first one they lost to Senegal.
Senegal, yes.
And they lost all their games, and out they went with a whimper. The same could happen to Algeria. They could go out of this competition without
They're
even
playing
scoring
Ivory
goal.
Coast. That's the irony about it. Now, they really have to play their hearts out and give everything. Maybe this would be 150% when they're playing at Ivory Coast.
The 2 teams that were meant to just walk that group, really, you know, Algeria, Ivory Coast, because, you know, I joked with you, I said, you know, Sierra Leone, they're out of this competition for 26 years and then they get lumbered with Ivory Coast and Algeria in their group. But, I mean, look at the performance they've put against those 2 teams. Remarkable, remarkable. So, yes, I mean, they have to get a result against Ivory Coast or they're out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a remarkable thing that we're saying this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's quite very, very interesting. And if you look at the groups, it's only in Nigeria's group where 2 wins in a row for Nigeria, who've been explosive in the competition, and also Morocco, 2 wins.
Sure.
Then came the competition, what do you call it? Cameroon.
I was going to say, don't forget Cameroon.
And just an update, Cameroon is 9 points. They've won the group.
No.
Yes.
No. Which means they beat Cape Verde, obviously.
Yeah, they beat Cape Verde.
Yeah.
So quite very, very interesting.
That's right. I mean, Cameroon, they've looked very good. Obviously, they're carried along by the host, being the host rather, with the crowd behind them for all the games. And I think that has definitely helped in their favor. And this last game against Cape Verde, which, when you think about it, a draw would have seen them win the group anyway. But they feel that their strongest side. So they obviously wanted to get the 9 points to finish, you know, uncontestably. And I think also for the momentum, for the sake of the momentum. But it's a risky strategy because if one of your players gets injured in a game which you don't have to win, then that could be quite costly. But, you know, good luck to them. They've looked good.
I think we still have to give an update again. The game is not quite over yet. It's half time, so that's why it's been updated in the group. At this point,
yes. Okay,
and
cool.
Burkina Faso also had 1 goal against Ethiopia for now, and which is going to look very, very interesting. And It's been very, very competitive.
It's been competitive. It's been, I think, surprisingly competitive. And I say this for particularly for people who don't follow African football, because I've said on the previous editions of Qsports and on other sports when we've been discussing AFCON, I think people are always shocked at how close these games are between the so-called fancied sides, where people can reel off all the names of all their stars because they play in all the big leagues in Europe. And then you come to a country like Sierra Leone. We don't have anybody in the Sierra Leone team who's in the Premier League, so they're not famous. And because of that, because people don't know, they think, well, Algeria will brush them off, Ivory Coast will brush them off. But it never turns out that way. And I'm not even sure what it is about AFCON that makes these games quite competitive. And as I said, even with Tunisia winning 4-0, really, if you took away the goals and you said, okay, guess the score of this based on everything else, nobody would predict a 4-0. It was a really close game, and the scoreline tells a lie to that, but the reality of it was a really close game. And so you get that, and I'm really pleased about that, because even a team like Ethiopia, completely made up of home-based players, I've been impressed with them playing what I would call Brazilian flair at times, really skillful. And I would not be surprised if in 2 or 3 months' time we hear that some of these clubs, either in some of the Arab countries or elsewhere, have signed some of these Ethiopian players because they look really good. They're very skillful, very drilled, very tactically aware. And I've been impressed by them. I know they're probably going to go out without obviously getting a point, but they looked good. I've been impressed by them. Yeah.
Well, with all the goodies about the competition, we also have to talk about the downsides. Some pitch looks very dreadful. The pitch on which Ivory Coast played against Sierra Leone.
Yes.
You could see where the goalkeeper fumbled.
Yes.
Yeah, there's kind of a big...
It looked like somewhere you might want to plant potatoes rather than play football. It was quite atrocious. But the interesting thing was, if you think back to the game, when we were watching the game, it was never obvious. That it was a bad pitch. I mean, when he fell, because even I remember the commentators said, "Oh my God, look at that pitch," was what he said. It looked like, it was terrible. It looked awful. But when the game was on, it didn't look like that. And this is some of the things that people had been saying, perhaps the competition might be moved, because they said, pitches had been laid and they hadn't been given time to bed in the proper way that would have been expected. And, but they kind of brushed it aside. And I've not heard any of the teams complain
about the pitches.
That it was a bad pitch.
That was a bad
and that's
pitch.
always a sign. That's always a sign. When they don't complain about that, then it probably means that it's acceptable or it's playable, or they're thinking to themselves, well, it's Africa, what can you expect? But when you go back to 2010 World Cup in South Africa, I mean, the pitches were like carpet. You were playing on a lush carpet. They were fantastic pitches. And these ones are nothing like that. But no, I think the pitches, people kind of get used to them and just get on with it.
Well, let's talk about the weather. Does it anything have to do with the performance of certain teams? Because the Gambia and Mali game was played in the scorching sun, and in Limbe at the time it was 32 degrees.
32 degrees.
Yeah. So,
and
very difficult to play under those conditions. They had to take a water break almost on 2 occasions.
Well, this is it. And even in one of the games, they had 2 unofficial water breaks. Just because there was an injury, the referee allowed the players to go off and get some water because he realized. And, when people see this and they think, oh, but, you're from Africa, you must be used to that. The thing is, you and I don't play in that kind of heat. Normally. We'd wait for it to cool down before we went to play, unless, when we were at school and you run around like headless chickens and you don't care about the heat. But, as you grow older, you play football of a particular level, you're not going to be playing when it's that hot. So, for TV reasons and so on, so that it can be shown around the world at a particular time, we have these kick-off times that they're not really beneficial to the players. And so you end up, luckily, they're allowing water breaks, and they're even allowing unofficial water breaks. Otherwise, it will be horrendous.
We'll go way back, maybe a week ago in the competition, when Gambia played against Mauritania, got that famous result of a 1-0 victory. A bit of embarrassment when it comes to the national team, the national anthem for Mauritania. They tried it twice. It didn't work. And the players kind of looked down, oh, what are they talking about? At some point, the stadium announcer talks about the Mauritanian players singing the national anthem using their own voice.
They had to sing it, and that's what they did. But interestingly, the captain refused, and he gave a press conference afterwards, and he said, "This is an insult." He said, "You can go on YouTube and you can download the national anthem of every country. Why can't they have downloaded ours?" And he's right, and he refused. The rest of them, hand on their heart, and they sang. But he refused, the captain refused. So if you watch it again, you'll see he's the only one not singing.
That's quite very interesting, and
yeah.
one of my tournament's lows.
It's
Yes,
an embarrassment.
there are lots of good things about the competition, but those kinds of things are almost virtually unacceptable.
As was the referee blowing twice, by the way.
Yeah.
Johnny. I mean, come on. I mean, that was awful, and that was embarrassing. Although subsequently we heard that he was suffering from heat stroke and dehydration, and CAF, I was going to say FIFA, CAF have sort of excused him, but I think they've also said it's unlikely that he will referee another match in this tournament. I think it will be quite controversial if they give him another game, and I don't think they will.
Looking forward to the final group games. In each group, it's going to be a tough one, who goes through and then who gets out of the competition.
And this is what makes it interesting, because for most of the teams, there's something still to play for, and that makes the games interesting. It makes them exciting. People can't just play out a boring 0-0 draw, because sometimes if you end up top of your group, it means you stay in the city where you played your maybe first 2 games. And if you come second, it means you move somewhere else. If you come third, it means you. So there's incentive for everybody to do their best and try and win. So that makes it really, really fantastic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all the games, really. Yeah.
Well, Cameroon, we can say for a certain are through, maybe topping their group unless something changes otherwise.
Happens,
yeah, and if you look at the other teams as well, looks quite very, very interesting.
I mean, you've got Nigeria,
yeah.
You've got the likes of Egypt, and it's amazing that some of the teams that we thought would come flying out of the traps again. The talk about Egypt was that why they're not really sparking, because if you look at that team, that's a fantastic team and a fantastic squad they've got. The same for Tunisia, same for Nigeria. I know in the first game Iheanacho got the goal that won them the match, and in the second game they played a bit more expansively and rightly won. And I'm pleased for them, because they've got a Guavin, a home-based coach, which was a shock when he was appointed just a month before the tournament.
They were not pre-tournament favourites. That's Nigeria.
They weren't mine,
yes.
I'd never.
But the way they've played so far, they've shown like the best football from their first match against Egypt. Could this tack change that? Okay, Nigeria prior to the competition, maybe everyone gave Senegal a chance. Algeria, the holders, probably could defend it. Maybe Morocco, maybe Egypt and Tunisia.
I would not have had Nigeria in that. I mean, we're talking about the Mali coach eating his words. Nigeria making me eat my words, because I said I was totally unimpressed with them. I saw them in the World Cup qualifying, where they were in the same group as Cape Verde, and they just squeezed through, to get through to the next round, where they're going to be among the 10 teams that go for the World Cup. So I hadn't been impressed. And then when you hear, people like Osimhen couldn't come, Dennis, you feared for them. You think, well, where are the goals going to come from? Are they all going to? And then Igalo, his team refused to release him as well. So you had 3 really, really good players not being released, and you think, what are they going to do? And yet they seem to have found some sort of magic, and sometimes that can galvanize a team when they think that things are against them. And honestly, they've played better in this tournament than I've seen them in the last 2 or 3 years. So they really could be a threat, absolutely. Yeah.
A big threat, and for the record holders in terms of winning the competition. Egypt. Struggled in the first game against Nigeria, but the second game, Mo Salah got them that victory against Guinea-Bissau, but there were controversies in that match. You've watched it.
You know what? I've had this theory about big teams getting decisions against little teams, and nothing I've seen in this tournament has made me change my mind. There are goals that are disallowed that should have been allowed, and things that are allowed that should not be allowed. Guinea-Bissau came off feeling quite aggrieved that, you know, decisions went against them and decisions went in favor of Egypt. And, you know, some people might say it's, you know, sour grapes or you're bad losers, but I don't think it is. I think they had, you know, quite good grievances, and well, there's no right of appeal, so, you know, what can they do? They just have to get on with it, you know.
They just have to get on with it. And that's almost brought us to the tail end of the program. But just finally, congratulations, Team Gambia. That is the male team of the Gambia volleyball. They played in the Zone 2 Volleyball Championship hosted in the Gambia at the Independence Stadium volleyball court, and they beat Senegal neighbors 3 straight sets to nil. And for the female, they came second behind Senegal. Senegal won that one, gold, and Gambia silver. So congratulations, and we'll expand on that in our next edition of Q Sports. Thank you very much for watching. Join us next week. Bye for now.